We've looked at exchange systems in humans, or in particular we looked at gaseous exchange in humans and how that worked through the lungs. What we're going to look at for this video is exchange systems in plants. Now, before we start talking about the specific systems there are, we have to think about what substances plants are exchanging with the environment. And the first one that often comes to mind is carbon dioxide, and this actually goes in or diffuses into the leaf, usually from the underside through these structures called stomata, which we'll look at in a moment. But that's a substance that needs to go into the plant, and that's required for photosynthesis. A byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen, and that diffuses out of the leaf. And so we have the leaf as an exchange system, and it has to be very good at being an exchange system or an exchange surface, and we'll look at how it does that in a minute. It's probably worth remembering, however, that while we're talking about CO2 diffusing in, there are occasions when CO2 will diffuse out, and that's when there is respiration going on, or there's more respiration going on in the plant than there is photosynthesis, and that usually happens when it's quite dark. But for the purpose of what we're talking about now, CO2 can diffuse in through the leaf, oxygen can diffuse out, and these are two substances that need to be exchanged with the environment. Another thing that goes in, or another substance that goes in, is water, and this goes in through the roots. And with the water, we often also have something that we call mineral ions. And these are required in small amounts by the plant, but we're talking about things like potassium, nitrates, and something like magnesium. These are all mineral ions that the plant would need, and they are exchanged, or they actually go into the plant through the roots. Now, one way in which the roots become very good at absorbing these substances is to increase what we call their surface area. Surface area is a very, very important idea in lots of different systems within living things. How does the plant actually increase the surface area of its roots? Well, I've drawn a separate plant over here just to give you an idea, but here's our plant, here's our roots on this plant. If we magnify one particular area, so I've magnified this section here, and you look down at a cellular level, you'll see these root hair cells. And their job is to specifically increase the surface area through which water can be absorbed and mineral ions can be absorbed as well. It's been estimated that sometimes you can have 1 meter squared of area of the roots, and that can actually, by addition of the root hairs, go up to about 350 meters squared worth of surface area, just because we have these root hairs on the actual root system itself. So these are the substances that we are exchanging with the environment. The roots use this mechanism here. We need to look slightly more closely at leaves, and here is one example of a leaf. And the first thing that you should notice is that it is very flat and it is very thin. Now, this is important for an exchange surface because thin means that it can shorten the diffusion distance. So we've got a low diffusion distance. That means substances can be absorbed and released very quickly. So that's CO2 going in and O2 coming out, and these have only a short diffusion distance to get in and out, and so the leaf being very flat and very thin is useful. But that's not the end of it. There is more to it than that. If we take one of our leaves, and we've done this before for a previous video, but if we take one of our leaves, slice it in half down that line there, and look inside, let's make that a bit bigger. If we actually look into that area there through a microscope, you'll see the cells are arranged something like this. If I just enlarge that a little bit, as I say, we've seen something like this before and we labeled the different parts of it, but that's not what we're particularly interested today. What we're looking at is how this structure helps to improve the exchange of substances with the environment. And the first thing to look at is these little gaps that we have here. These are actually called stomata. This is plural. That means many. If you have one, we're talking about a stoma. And either the stomata are actually surrounded by, or on either side of them have these two cells called guard cells. We'll look at those in a minute more carefully. Two guard cells, and they can open and close and allow gases to diffuse in and out. But what's very clever about the inside of the leaf is you can see that these cells here, and we call these the mesophyll cells. Before, these are actually loosely packed. They're not very tightly packed inside this area here. They're very loosely packed, and that means if they're loosely packed, we have a lot of different surfaces that can actually absorb gases. So we have all the purple surface that I'm colouring now. All this is possible surface area to absorb gases, and all the way up to the palisade cells here. So having cells that are loosely packed inside the leaf itself increases the surface area greatly, and that's not only for substances going in like carbon dioxide going in, but also oxygen diffusing out. It has a high surface area through which it can diffuse out, and also water vapor, which we'll look at again separately. But that's the key features of the leaf and the key features of the exchange systems in plants, the key substances that we need to exchange. And you should be aware of how the leaf, the roots, the plant has different structures that allow maximum exchange, maximum surface area for exchange of substances with the environment.